Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, 5 Barriers to Effective Training Programs and How to Crush Them. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer. So this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel. So this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send those over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to try to weave the questions in as it relates to the content that we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for a live Q&A. I am recording today's session, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording, as well as the slides and follow-up information available on our blog after today's session. So that's bizlibrary.com/bizblog. I also put a link to the slides in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should be able to click on that link and then save them. I also sent out a link to the slides in the reminder email that you received this morning. And then keep your eye on the chat. I'll send a lot of links and references and recommended resources in the chat, and then I'll also post those on our blog after today's webinar. Happy to say that today's session has been approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you HR professionals attending. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar. I'll also email out a link to the certificate in the reminder email that you'll receive within 24 hours. The most important thing is the program ID number. That's what you'll need to record with HRCI. If you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. Again, my name is Jessica. I am on the marketing team with BizLibrary. I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in journalism. I've been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of BizLibrary at BizLibrary and also at my own account at Jess L. Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around training and development, human resources, and marketing in general. So if you're on either of those social networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for BizLibrary. Chris has also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm. We helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning development and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Chris has also taught courses on conflict resolution and discrimination in the HR management program at WashU in St. Louis. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. So here at BizLibrary, we kindly refer to Chris as a recovering lawyer. He's also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne, STL. And he's also a regular contributor on LinkedIn, so I'm sure you'd love it if you reach out and connect as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on BizLibrary. BizLibrary provides the industry's largest and fastest growing collection of high-quality training videos and e-learning courses covering every topic area imaginable. Whatever training your employees need, you'll find it with BizLibrary. So content and learning technology all in one place. Additionally, our cloud-hosted LMS, or Learning Management System, and social learning application help organizations streamline and simplify important learning and performance management processes. All right, so enough about us. kick things off today, I have a quick poll question, and this one is related to you, specifically, and the barriers that you have faced related to learning and development on the job. So this is putting yourself in the learner's seat. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a minute. All right, so what are the biggest barriers you've faced related to learning and development on the job? Is it a lack of resources and time? Oh, it should say time. Lack of motivation to change or improve. Training doesn't make an impact. C, performance isn't improved. Or E, lack of support from senior leaders.
Hey, Jessica, how you doing?
Hey, Chris, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I know, shocking. I was quiet there for a second, wasn't it?
You are. I can tell you're a little bit tired today, but I'll try and keep you up.
Oh, this is going to be interesting. Jessica and I were talking while you guys were thinking about this poll for just a moment here. We won't keep this open too terribly long. Just want to move into this content. We're talking about a blog post that kind of inspired this webinar that Charles Jennings wrote. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get into it. It was rather provocative, I think is the best way to put it. But he has some interesting insights in Mr. Jennings. Those of you who aren't familiar with him, leads the 70-20-10 Institute. He's a very interesting thought leader in our space and has some very fascinating things to say. But you know, getting around these barriers, this is really one of the most troubling things that all of us that work in this space have to confront, and we've all had them before, so or had them in front of us before, I guess I should say, these barriers. So I'm just kind of curious to see how everybody approaches this poll question here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close it out and share the results with everyone. So it looks like we've got 51% say lack of resources and time, 20% said training doesn't make an impact, 20% said lack of support from senior leaders, 7% lack of motivation, and then 3% performance isn't improved.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I mean, the lack of resources and time, you know, is kind of a persistent theme that we hear in webinars across a wide range of topics. And it kind of gets down to, you know, if we begin to understand the potential value and why this is important, it starts to get easier to make that time and set aside the resources and time to make it happen. But that is certainly a recurring theme, isn't it?
Yep, and you know, a good comment that came in from Mel, she said that lack of resources and time can also mean lack of support from leaders. So definitely very much interrelated. And I'm actually surprised at the number. I'm not surprised by the lack of resources and time, because it's kind of a question everyone, how can you do more with less? But the 20% that said training doesn't make an impact, coming from people that are likely in training and development or likely in learning and development and human resources, is kind of surprising.
Well, we'll get into that, because I think we'll get into some of the reasons that may be the case. Doesn't necessarily surprise me, but I understand what you're saying. I totally understand. Yeah, it's kind of too on one level, it's kind of too bad, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right, so go ahead. I'm going to pass the ball over to you, Chris. You can outline kind of the three main things that we're going to cover for today, and keep going.
All right. Yeah, it's a good start. Well, thank you all so much for participating in the poll. We really appreciate that. It makes this a lot more fun when we hear from you. So we want to cover three kind of high-level things. Now, two of which are going to be laid out pretty clearly. The best practices about how to overcome the barriers, we're going to cover those as we go through each of the barriers. I want to start by laying out a strategic framework for effective learning development programs, and kind of give you sort of a different way of thinking about a strategic framework, because I think that's a real important piece of this, which I hope will begin to get you to think through how to drive training in your organization that can have an impact. Then we're going to talk about these 5 most common barriers that organizations face in training and development. And again, these were inspired a lot by a blog post that we read from Charles Jennings, but they show up over and over and over. We keep seeing these rear their ugly heads in a variety of places and ways. So we want to address these. And then as we address each of the barriers, we're going to come up and I think maybe suggest some ways that you can get around each of them. So let's start with the framework. And it begins with sort of a recognition of the kind of reality of the world around us. It used to be true that we could kind of isolate the outside world to the outside, and we come to work and sort of leave things on the parking lot and come into the workplace, and we do our thing and then we go home. That's not really the case anymore. We can't escape big data. We can't escape the influence of the internet. We can't escape the interconnectedness that we have with just the world in general. But every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. It's so much that 90% of the data in the world has been created in the last 2 years alone. I mean, that is a lot of data. Sort of like when Dr. Evil asks for $1 million. Quintillion's a lot of zeros. I mean, it's a staggering amount of data. 6 billion hours of video are watched on YouTube each month. That's almost an hour for every person on Earth. That's just incredible amount of. We watch a lot of video. We're online a lot. Again, this is the way people take in information today. The technology that enables this, the devices that allow us to access video like this, the behaviors, the expectations, all of these things, all of these influence, all of these broad factors are coming to work with us. 9 out of 10 Americans that own smartphones are already using them at work. There's a Cisco Bring Your Own Device, BYOD, it's probably an acronym you've heard, Insights report from 2013. Now the fascinating thing about that fact in this report is the vast majority of people that are using their smartphones are using them for work-related purposes. That's the astounding thing about that. Of the people that bring their smartphones to work, 9 out of 10 use them for work. So it's not that they're using smart devices to, chat with friends or play games, or they're using them for work-related purposes. Now, just think about that for just a second. If we have systems and tools available to our employees that reflect the way employees access information away from work, would they have to do this? The answer is probably no, but here's where we are, okay? So the world's tilted, in terms of the way that we need to think about how employees take in information in terms of accessing video, short video, the types of devices that people are using to access information. We've gone and we're moving very rapidly away from desktop computing to immediate access on devices of our choosing, tablets, smartphones, where we have this information at our fingertips when we want it in the format of our choosing. The world has shifted, and it's not going back. It's not going to go back. I love this bit of research. This is a fascinating bit of information, I think, and it comes from Robert Kelly. He did some really interesting research. He's with Carnegie Mellon. Now, the original research was published, I believe, in 2002, and then he went back and added to it in 2006. But in 1986, we held about 2/3 of the information that we needed to perform our job just between our ears. We had it. We could just do our job. So traditional training, if you think about sort of the traditional training model, worked pretty well. Okay? Worked pretty well. By 1997, only about 15 to 16% of the information we needed to effectively perform our jobs we could hold within our brain. I mean, the pace of change had picked up, and now it's down to 8 or 9%. That was in 2006. I don't know what the percentage is today. It's probably lower. Bottom line here is, I mean, look at that change in how we can access information to do our job successfully. It is gone from a lot of that information contained internally to having to rely upon external resources to access knowledge that we need to do our jobs. Now, have we effectively adjusted our learning and development strategies to this kind of world? Or are we continuing to try to cram a ton of information into the brains of our employees that's more reflective of that 1986 model? I would suggest that a lot of learning strategies reflect the 1986 model as opposed to just the 2006 model. And I can guarantee you the percentage has gotten lower. So is it any wonder when you look at that percentage, the poll percentages that we talked about earlier, when you think about training doesn't make an impact, we had 20%. Well, if we're trying to pile a lot of information into people's brains, but we can remember and we know a smaller and smaller percentage of what we need to effectively perform our job, is it any wonder that we look at training as having less and less impact, when what we need is a different approach? Okay, so that's the strategic, that's sort of the strategic framework that we have to get our head wrapped around. And then you layer that on top of what executives expect from us. This is a great article from CLO magazine in 2010, so it's a little dated, but I haven't seen anything that tells me this is much different, to be perfectly honest. And the title of the article is How Executives View Learning Metrics, and this is by Patty and Jack Phillips, and of course they're big proponents of the Kirkpatrick-Phillips methodology of measuring the impact of training, okay? But this is great stuff. So 94% of us measure, 94% of organizations that do measure training measure activity. But in terms of what executives are looking at, that was ranked 6th of 8. Impact was ranked number 1. Only 8% of organizations measure that. Value was ranked number 2. Only 4% of organizations were capturing that type of information. So you've got these fascinating, at least in my view, these fascinating disconnects between behaviors, technology expectations, what we need to perform, and what executives are looking for, which I think mitigates in favor of kind of a different way of looking at and creating a strategic framework. You know, and I've done this. You know, I thought, wow, we put this great employee training program together, the employees are just going to love it. Great classroom work, and these great videos are going to go with it, and these materials are just fantastic, and then nothing happens. Or they like the class, but 90 days later we don't see any improvement, or they don't remember it. Any number of outcomes, right? So this is a quote from Michael Rochelle. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Brandon Hall Group, and I love this quote. In a world of learning and development where complexity is the enemy, organizations need a simple and nimble approach to delivering high-quality learning anywhere, anytime. Complexity is the enemy. And I just think this is really a great way to begin to think through this strategic framework, sort of a new way of getting at this. We need to simplify not only our approach, but simplify what it is we're doing in terms of access, what it is we're doing in terms of delivery. Complexity is the enemy. Let's remove barriers. Let's make sure that employees have immediate, on-demand, anywhere, anytime access to content that answers questions that they're asking. Complexity is the enemy. Jessica, I see a question here that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, good question from Yanet. She asked, is there a difference, so referring back to the chart of what executives are looking for, is there a difference between training and educating when we think of impact and application?
Yeah, I would think that there is. I mean, and I'm going to give you kind of an academic definition, Yanet. If you think of training, training is a way of teaching people to do sort of the same task over and over. So for instance, we can train people to use an Excel spreadsheet. So I can be trained to do pivot tables. I can be trained to embed videos in PowerPoint or in a Word document. I need to be educated to make good decisions. I need to be educated in order to apply complex listening, decision-making, and communication skills. Does that make sense? Education is sort of the application of foundational bits of information, foundational knowledge to more complex real-life situations. Training is more of a sort of a simple completion of task kind of thing. And I think that's one of the things we have to get away from, and we're going to talk about that when we get to Jennings' 5 barriers here in just a moment, and that is sort of this he calls it a training mindset, which we'll get into in a minute. I don't know if that was a good answer or not, but Jessica, did that make sense?
Yeah, and I think sometimes the confusion comes with, so maybe you'll say you're going to a training class or you're taking a training course or watching a training video, and you're thinking, when you look at training the way that you've defined it, it's something that's like process driven, so or like a skill. So I'm learning how to use this computer program, or I'm learning how to do this kind of checklist thing. But sometimes training courses or videos apply to more things like soft skills or more behavior-based things that we're learning in the workplace. So does that make sense? That so the confusion is that we're calling training everything versus,
right,
you're learning some skills or key behaviors that necessarily wouldn't fall under the training definition.
I agree with you. I think training is a subset of education. I think education is a more complex, sophisticated sort of establishing values and teaching behaviors and behavior modification. And when I say values, I mean it's sort of establishing benchmarks for decision making. That's the values I mean. I think that's kind of the way to get at it. Oh, great ad from Randall. Training is the what of learning. Education is the why. Great way to put it. Thank you for saving me from myself. That's a really good way to put it. Very, very good way to put it. Okay, so here are 5 common barriers that we see. Now, we're going to use Jennings' terminology. I'm going to go through these, and I'm going to sort of take issue with some of his definitions, and I'll explain sort of how we think of these, and keep that strategic framework that I laid out for you in mind, the idea that complexity is the enemy, the idea here that we want to simplify our approach, simplify our thinking in terms of objectives, and simplify access, okay? Complexity is the enemy. So here are the 5 barriers. Efficiency, the status quo, convenience, and we'll talk about a conspiracy of convenience in just a second, a training mindset, which ties right into what we're talking about now, and manager support. So let's dive into these one at a time, and we'll explain each of them. Okay, so efficiency. And every time we do this webinar, I have to go back and read Jennings' blog post to make sure that I really can explain these effectively, because it's a great blog post, by the way. But if you do go read it, be prepared to be taken back a little bit, because he uses some very strong, very provocative ideas and ways to challenge thinking. Okay, so just be prepared for that. But efficiency, he makes a couple of really good points about efficiency. And part of it is that we're driven so hard on ROI that we focus on the wrong things sometimes. Going back to that measurements. We focus, we measure, participation in training. We're focused on inputs. We're going to provide this many courses to this many people on this many topics. And so that's probably the wrong place to focus. What we need to think about instead are the outputs. What is it we're trying to accomplish? What are the actual goals and objectives of the program, okay? I mean, at its core, employee development is about improving performance, right? That's what we need to be focusing on. So how do we improve performance in areas that actually drive business benefits? And when we can break it down that way, we end up with a program that is in fact efficient because we have a focus. We are relentlessly focused on performance improvements in areas that can deliver benefits, which means we have to make effective use of technology. We have to think about content carefully. So does it make sense for us to build this content? Do we buy this content? Do we borrow this content? And we have created, again, through no fault of our own, this is just the way the industry has developed over the years. We have a lot of complex systems and structures, and that gets back to what Michael Rochelle said. The complexity that we've built up sometimes is the enemy. We've created a lot of barriers, and again, inadvertently. I've been a part of this too. This is the world that I work in. We have created unnecessary barriers between employees and learning, and we've got to get away from that. We've got to make sure that it's seamless. To use a term that Dean Pichet, the president of BizLibrary, uses, which I just love, frictionless learning, so that there's no friction between the employee and learning content in that moment of need. They can access it, they can see it, they can apply it, and they can move forward, so that it really drives performance, so that the systems and structures are elegant and simple. Not saying they're easy, but we strive for simplicity. Got it. Looks like we have another good question.
Yeah, good question from Mitch around efficiency. So he asks, can efficiency be around cost effectiveness? Is it efficient because it reaches a large number of people easily, or does efficiency really focus on outcomes, or is that around learning and changing behaviors?
Well, the barrier that, I'm going to answer your question, Mitch, but let me kind of go back to something. The barrier that Jennings is talking about is we have focused on efficiency in the wrong way as learning professionals. Frequently the profession has, by focusing too much on inputs rather than focusing on outputs. We can drive efficiency much, much better in terms of cost effectiveness, reaching more people effectively by focusing on learning and performance outputs, focusing on changing behaviors that actually improve and drive organizational goals. That's what he's talking about. So we have to shift the focus on efficiency from inputs to outputs. That's the barrier that Jennings is talking about. So, one of the things that we saw, Coxie Learning Consultants produced a really great forecast built, I think they had 1,600 or 1,700 participants in this poll, this survey, about learning solutions for 2014, and it was all around content. Look at this. Off-the-shelf content was one of the technologies people, video training, then learning management systems, then mobile learning. So this is where people's heads were in terms of, and these are all really, if you think about it, all of this is around getting content to employees quickly, easily, efficiently, removing those barriers. So this was just sort of, this was interesting that at least the participants in this survey were kind of where Jennings was in terms of him saying, look, this is a barrier. I mean, part of the industry was certainly kind of thinking this through. And if you think through, one of the issues with really driving efficient and effective learning, video-based and online-based training can really help do this. It, can reduce cost. We can reach more employees, getting to Mitch's point, reach more employees at a lower cost, eliminate travel. We can improve productivity. Again, that idea of on-demand, anywhere, anytime, that idea of frictionless learning, removing the barriers between employee and content in that moment of need. This is where video technology can make a big, big impact in what we're attempting to accomplish. So, online learning in this sense can make a ton of sense. This is some data put together by the United States Department of Education, just sort of laying out the features of online learning compared to the benefits. Jessica has provided these slides for everybody, so we can you can have these. I'm not going to read through each one of these, but this is a really kind of a neat, straightforward way to kind of get at these efficiencies. And then if you think about all of the ways that technology tools can help us make a learning program more effective, more efficient. Think about the way learning departments, training departments, if you like, have changed. More collaborative. They're network-based and driven, both in terms of technology and the way people connect. We need to be content curators and creators, that is, connecting people to content that they need when they need it. Flatter organizations, fewer managers, much more specialists. And again, that idea, Jessica used that phrase earlier, having to do more with less, smaller and decentralized. Okay? So, this all gets back to the idea of harnessing informal learning, just making sure that people have access to this information, which is impossible to do in today's work world without using technology tools. But, help drive accountability, make sure people understand what's necessary to work, help people understand how to work smarter, getting back to that idea that they can tap into information and share information with each other, which requires us as leaders, learning leaders, to model that behavior and help us ensure that we can get the right people and the right tools in the right places. This is so the second of the 5 barriers, and this is a big one, is the status quo. Inertia is a very, very real thing. Organizations are slow to move sometimes. Anybody that's tried any sort of change effort knows this. Whatever the status quo is, changing it gives you the opportunity to be remarkable. From Tribes, it's a great quote from Seth Godin. But, we tend to be risk averse as organizations. It's normal. But it really creates problems when we're trying to improve training outcomes. So processes and systems can be hard to change, so sometimes we have to work within them. And then the training industry itself have been laggards in helping us do this. Going back to those numbers earlier about all the data that's been presented, the BYOD mindset, the idea that people are bringing devices to work. These are the ASTD, or now ATD, competencies that were released in 2013. Business skills, global mindset, industry knowledge, and personal skills and technology literacy, which was introduced for the first time in 2013. Well, learning technology has been around for a lot longer than that. So the industry itself has been really slow to adapt to where our employees are. So here's an alternative view of competencies that might be worth considering as you're looking at what an employee learning professional might need to do and the way they might need to function. Collaboration. Think about informal learning, connecting people to content and to each other, networking skills, being sort of master networkers, being able to help people find expertise and content within and without your organization. Good leadership skills, being able to help people function effectively in leading by example. Presentation skills. How many times have you seen great content just crash because we didn't know how to present it well? I mean, presentation skills should be, I think, mandatory for anybody in management roles today. And digital literacy. Folks, the world is here. This is where it is. It's a digital world today, and we all need some baseline level of digital literacy. And I love this quote from Lewis Carroll. The Red Queen says this: it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get to somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. And sometimes it feels that way, doesn't it? But that's exactly how we have to think about getting around this sort of inertia, the pull that the status quo has for us. But here's some great data published by Burson by Deloitte. I think this was a 2011 study that really lays out the competitive advantages of true learning cultures. Organizations with strong learning cultures outperform their peers. 46% more likely to be first to market. They're more productive, more profitable. I mean, these are the kind of numbers, going back to what chief executives look at: impact, business benefit, rather than just participation. I mean, this is the kind of data that we need to be able to marshal, understand, and present to build the business case. Yeah, people hate change, but we have to get them there. So this is where leadership, we go back to those competencies that we are suggesting that might be worth thinking about. If you really, you guys know this, we all understand this. Learning and development at its core is about change. We're trying to help individuals, teams, and organizations move from one state of performance to an improved state of performance. This is about change. In learning and development, we have to take a leadership role in this. John Kotter at Harvard Business School: 70% of change initiatives fail for a whole range of reasons, but we have to take a holistic view of this, drive this, be leaders, and we just really have to do this. This is a great quote. To be an effective team leader, you need patience, strength, insight, tenacity, and courage, and if that doesn't work, bribe them with donuts. Food always helps. Jessica, any questions or comments that we should take before I move into the next of the barriers?
No, we're good to go, Chris. You can go ahead and move to the third barrier that we're facing.
All right. Well, the status quo is a big one, that's for sure. Convenience. Now, Jennings calls this a conspiracy of convenience, and he describes it like this. So you have a manager that comes to the training and development department and says, I need training on XYZ skill. The training department puts together a training program. They go deliver the training over a period of some time. The employees attend. Everybody provides the course evaluations. Training was great. Thank you very much. And everybody pats themselves on the back, and everybody goes, super, we're done. And he quotes this kind of sarcastic remark, isn't that convenient? And unfortunately, that's kind of how a lot of training worked for a long, long time. But he calls that a conspiracy of convenience. Manager asked for training, training department developed, did it. So it's sort of like throwing training at a problem, and you kind of hope that something worked. The problem is it isn't a linkage. That's not creating that linkage between a true solution to an actual business problem in improving the behaviors that are in fact going to solve the problem. It's a convenient way to get at it, and we can walk away and say, well, we gave it a try. We have to shoot for a true alignment with organizations' strategic goals and understand the gap in performance and analyze performance gaps. And that's where we drive training challenges. And the way you get at that is to conduct a root cause analysis. And a root cause analysis is a systematic approach to really figure out what is going on in some area that you need to improve. So it's a relentless, objective pursuit of an objective truth, and it requires you to ask why. So Jessica and I are going to illustrate how this might work. So this is how you might see a root cause analysis flow as you investigate the source of a performance challenge in a client services team who's working to improve client retention by 5%. Okay, so I'll start. So why are we not retaining clients at our target of 90%? We're only at 85%.
So I'm just to clarify, I'm going to be the client services manager. So you are going to be asking me to help understand the performance problem. So I say because we don't talk to our clients enough. Maybe we talk to them every 60 to 90 days.
Okay, so why is that a problem?
We've learned that when we talk to clients at least every 30 days, they renew their contracts at a rate of over 92%.
Okay, so why do the client services professionals not reach out to their clients every 30 days?
Well, really, it's because they have too many clients. And even for those that have a manageable number of clients, they don't always have relationships with really, the key decision makers at the company. Most reps have 80 or more clients. The optimum numbers we found is about 50.
So why is having a relationship with a key decision maker important? Does this have any bearing or impact on client retention?
Yeah, actually, we've learned that it's not just the frequency of contact that matters. When we have a good relationship with the key decision maker, the renewal rate is usually 92%. When we communicate every 30 days and have a relationship with the decision maker, the renewal rate is 96%.
Okay, so why do the reps have too many clients?
Well, not all of them do. I mean, we've had turnover recently. We expect to add a new rep within 30 days. And 60 days, the book of business should be balanced and manageable for the whole team.
Why do we not have good relationships with the decision maker?
I feel like I should be laying on a couch. Because the reps, as a group, they're really not adept at relationship building and establishing strategic partnerships.
Okay, so there you go. I asked why 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it was 6 times. I went through why, and now we've gotten to the root cause of the problem. There's actually 2 of them here. One, Jessica identified that as a team they have too many clients, and then we found a performance gap in building and maintaining strategic relationships with clients. So we've dug through this, and now we have something. So if we hadn't done a root cause analysis like that, Jessica may have come to me and said, hey, I need help with client service. So we do client services training, and we walk away. We feel better about it, but we don't see any improvement. But now we've figured out the actual 2 root causes of the problem. One is not a training problem. One is a systems problem that we're fixing by getting the right number of reps to spread the book of business out right. But the other is a training problem that we can help with, and it has to do with teaching reps how to build strategic relationships. So the objective here isn't to make people necessarily feel better by just providing training. The objective here is to improve the competencies or skills of the team in a way that will improve behaviors that are aligned with the corporate objective of improving client retention. And that's how you do it. Now, this is a simple, we just kind of went through this quickly, but that's how you do a root cause analysis. You just keep asking why, and don't take the first answer. Dig in and keep digging until you get to what is really at the root cause of the problem. And you may have a training problem. You may have you may have a blend of problems, but that's what it comes down to. So then the next barrier is what Jennings refers to as a training mindset. And this sort of permeates a lot of what we've talked about. And this is sort of the need to change the focus from pure inputs to performance. And that really ties right into what we just went through. If we had been in a training mindset at the beginning of that, we just would have gone to Jessica's team and said, here's your client services, here's your customer service training, we're all off to the races, and off we go. On the other hand, by focusing on the performance, which was teaching people how to build strategic relationships, we have a really, really good chance of getting to where we need to go. So we have to move into a performance improvement mindset to make sure that we're really driving the behaviors that we want to improve. That's really a key piece of this. And the Kirkpatrick and Phillips levels really can help us with that. We've got to make sure people are participating, that they understand what they've learned, that they can apply it at work, and then really understand how to drive into those levels 4 and 5 and deliver those business benefits to the senior executives. That's really what this going to repeat this chart, but that's really what that's about. We want to get to that impact. We want to get to that value, those areas that the senior leadership in our organization want and need to see. Okay, so this is a good illustration. So we need training to increase revenue. So the training activities could be sales training. We need to improve quality, so attention to detail courses. But when you think about it in a little different way, increased revenue, but okay, when we start to quantify it, well, by how much and in what areas? If we want to improve quality, well, how do we want to improve it? So we begin to shift from just a rote sort of response to diving in and beginning to really explore the business need and really dive into a performance mindset as opposed to strictly a training mindset. Hope that helps. We have some more good questions. It looks like, Jessica, is this a good time to take them before we move on, or should I keep going?
Keep going, Chris, and I'll pose it to you shortly.
Okay. Okay, so then the next piece is manager support. This is the fifth. So the 4 barriers we've covered: efficiency, status quo, which is a big one, convenience, and the training mindset. So then the 5th barrier is manager support. This is enormous. At its foundation, we cannot deliver the goods on employee development, behavior improvement, performance improvement at the end without frontline manager support. It's critical. No other relationship has more impact on the improved performance of your employees than the relationship between your employees and their immediate supervisor. There's some great research from Barbara Carnes on this subject out there. I strongly encourage you to read her blog about sticky training. It's just phenomenal. But this is really critical. You need your manager's input before training begins, during training, and most importantly, after training, so that the managers understand the why and, importantly, understand how to support the objectives of the development activities after training programs have begun, so that you end up going from simple training to true education, so that the managers understand how to incorporate learning into everyday workflows. They know how to ask questions. They know how to engage their employees. They know how to facilitate training. They understand how it all works, fits together, and ties together, and they can really provide the kind of support to your employees that they need to really drive a culture of continuous improvement. Remember, the idea here is change. You know, we're trying to go from one state of performance to a desired state of performance, and you have to have manager support. This isn't really optional. It also helps immensely to make your employees stakeholders. Now, just by the way, they're already learning on their own. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, Charles Jennings, who kind of inspired a big part of this webinar, is the head of the 70-20-10 Institute. You probably heard that term used before, which basically says that it's a theory. It's not hard and fast, nor has it been proven conclusively, but the theory goes like this, that we learn about 70% of what we need to perform our job effectively informally, 20% socially, and 10% formally. In other words, our employees don't need us to teach them. They're going to learn on their own, okay? And I think, by and large, most of us would probably agree that that's true to an extent. So we have a couple of choices. We can walk away and kind of go, all right, you're on your own, go, you're going to leave it up to your own devices. Or we can embrace that idea. And going back to the idea we talked about earlier, create this frictionless environment where there are few to no barriers between employees and important content that helps them answer questions that they need, so that this on-their-own learning happens quickly and easily and on their own terms. So it's tied to our organizational mission, so that continuous learning and ongoing development is a really critical piece of everybody's job. It helps with employee engagement, especially if our managers are involved too and employees understand their stake in this and what's expected of them. if we provide the tools and resources and technology tools to help employees really understand what's going on. And this is the big piece where our managers can really, really help seal the deal, and that's teaching managers the value and importance of continuous feedback. And when I talk about feedback, a lot of folks immediately kind of go to, well, we've made a mistake, so let's use this as a learning opportunity. And I've certainly done that over the course of my career, and sometimes you have to do that. But think about how employees feel when they've made a mistake. Good employees especially feel bad enough, right? So typically speaking, a good question to ask, can it be fixed? Yep, then go fix it. And let's learn from it and move on. But what if you took a win, a big success, a great month, a great project, and debriefed a success and went through all the steps that went into making a win really work well? Talked about the planning, talked about the meetings, talked about the relationships, talked about the proposal, talked about the communications, talked about all the pieces, all the elements that went into a success. I promise that you will find places all throughout the success where things could be improved, where things could have been better, where people could have even increased their performance even a little bit. But think about teaching from a wins perspective. Are employees going to be defensive? Or are they going to feel really great? Okay, they're already in a celebratory mood. They feel, hey, this was really super, and now I'm going to learn how to do this even better. I mean, you catch people in a positive framework, a positive frame of mind, and that's when you can really, really leverage those successes into even higher performance. So that's when continuous feedback can really make a big difference. There's a competency that is out there that I think really kind of begins to tie a lot of what we've talked about today together very nicely, and it's called learning agility. I first saw the term, I'm embarrassed to admit it's been out there longer than this article, but I first saw the term mentioned in Human Resources Executive last winter in an article titled The Importance of Agility. And it's a set of behaviors that can be learned, it's a skill that can be learned, but essentially it prepares people to perform well in novel or unfamiliar situations by teaching people to draw on past experiences. It is a phenomenal bit of work. I highly encourage you to grab that article. It is just a great bit of thought leadership. So, key takeaways for today. Let's take a different approach to learning and development. Let's focus on outputs. Let's focus on performance improvement. Let's identify the barriers in our organization. Let's start with manager support. It's the single most important factor. We mentioned it fifth, but it really is critical. What can we do to improve manager support? And sometimes it's a change in culture, and change isn't always easy. So how can we begin to gather some small wins to begin to shift the culture? What are some things that we can do to begin to shift this around a little bit? All right, Jessica, I am going to pass the ball over to you, I think, and get a quick drink and get ready to take some questions.
Perfect. Sounds good, Chris. Again, just send over, we have a few questions in the queue already, but send them over through the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I have a couple of recommended resources for all of you. This first one is a course series, so they're all short videos. Each is less than 10 minutes, and there's 4 courses within the series. And so it's the idea that throughout your organization, you have all these great ideas, you have great processes, great practices that could be used to improve your overall business, but nobody really knows it. So it's going to help you bring those to light and walk you through that. And then the second one is another short video. It's a leadership lesson video, that's what we call them, and it's you have to ask the right questions to adapt. So it's, again, kind of getting at the root cause, so you're just not throwing training at the problem. You're able to ask those good questions like Chris did with me today. So those are 2 recommended resources. All of these courses and more are included in the BizLibrary collection. So there's more than 7,000 video and e-learning courses. It's set up to where your employees have unlimited access, and it covers more than 25 different topic areas. So you're welcome to try out the courses that I recommended or any of the other resources included in the library. Just let us know through the poll that I'll put up in just a minute. All right, so Chris, is there a question that you saw you want to start with, or can I go ahead and grab one for you?
Jessica, I was so focused on the presentation today, I have not been paying attention to questions, so grab one and throw it my way.
All right, happy to do so. So this question comes from Yanette. She asks, you tend to get leadership's buy-in when it comes to training and performance improvement. On the flip side, how can you get their buy-in when training is also beneficially convenient when it comes to conduct or employee behaviors? They tend to separate performance and behavior or conduct.
Well, that's a really good question, and I think you said it was a good question. Janet's asked a couple of pretty tough ones today. This is no exception. Well, you're talking about two different sort of objectives for the training. So one is almost sort of a compliance-based thing. We've got conduct that we have to address. The other is we want to improve performance. So you can't ignore either side of that equation. I think they're both really important. You're going to get the investment in the buy-in when you make a business case for the performance improvement, because that's really where you're going to drive sort of that bottom line piece of it. Now, if by conduct you mean behavior modification, behavior improvements as a way to improve performance, then that becomes a subset of that business case. But stay focused on performance improvement as a way to really drive sort of the subject matter of the content that you want to deliver. That's really what we want to focus on, is performance gaps. Now, conduct, you may have to address conduct as it comes up. Those are always going to be out there. They're real. They're legitimate training targets and training issues. But ultimately, the strategic objectives should be aimed at performance gaps that will help you achieve organizational goals. I don't know if that was exactly tied to your question, Yanette. Let us know, and if it wasn't, I'll take it offline and shoot you an email.
Yeah, and if you think about it in terms of, so if the performance is tied to a specific competency, so basically you have to be competent in this certain area, usually there's supporting behaviors that help you achieve competency. So if they're missing something in the behaviors, so they're likely not competent in that certain area. So it's kind of drilling down a little bit further. But that's just another way to look at it. All right, so this next question comes from Kathy. She says, learning styles affect the ability to retain what is received during training. How can you improve that impact when you're dealing with so many different styles?
Well, great question, and there's two parts to the answer. First goes back to that fifth barrier, that's manager support. You got to make sure that your managers understand various learning styles and how to reinforce learning lessons based upon both learning style and the personal style of the employees that are there, which requires some emotional intelligence. There's some other training pieces that kind of go with that with the managers. The second piece of it is to make sure that you offer a wide enough variety of content and resources so that employees have some choices in terms of the content that they can absorb that might appeal more to them. So for instance, I'm just going to use us as an example. We have some content that's funny, these cutting-edge communication. Some people learn really well with humor. We have some other content that's more traditional, and some people would prefer that type of content. So when you've got a variety of content, that's one way to get at it. The second piece is to make sure your managers understand how to reinforce the lessons based upon learning styles. Those are the two ways to get at that. Great question, though.
All right, great questions today. I'll go ahead and wrap things up. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link to the completion certificate in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Again, I'll also email out the certificate as well as the slides, recording, and follow-up information within 24 hours. We do these webinars every week, so next week's session is on taking the pain out of performance reviews. So hope you'll consider joining us for a future webinar. I just put up the August schedule today, so you should see some fresh content up there as well. Again, thank you so much for attending with us today. Thank you, Chris, for presenting, and hope you'll join us again.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you on a webinar in the near future.